Good day. I just finished an interview with Debbie Young of the Alliance of Independent Authors. It was a fascinating interview. She's a very interesting person and has some good things to say. Won't you please listen? Thank you. I'm here with Debbie Young, and she's the administrator for ALLI, which is the Alliance of Independent Authors. She's also an author in her own right, and we're going to interview for a fiction masterclass today. So, Debbie, why don't you tell me about yourself?
Right, okay, yes, I am now a novelist. I'm writing a series of cozy mystery books, cozy mystery novels set in a little village very much like the English country village that I live in a part of England called the Cotswolds, very rural, about 100 miles from London. And this is the first of them, the Best Murder in Show, first of the Sophie Sayers Village Mysteries. So I'm writing a series of 7 of those and having great fun doing that. I have plans for other fiction series as well, and I've also published short story collections in the past, and I kind of acclimatized myself to self-publishing by starting with the short pieces, and now I'm on a roll with the novels, so I'm having great fun. So that's about my sort of fiction writing life. I also, as you say, I work for the Alliance of Independent Authors, and my role there is to manage the Author Advice Centre, which is built around a huge resource of material, including about just over 2,000 blog posts on there. So we've got an enormous archive of material for authors of all kinds, whatever genre you write in. And we also have some reference books that we write. I've written a couple of those as well. So I write various non-fiction. So we have a couple of these. They're all under this kind of branding. One about how to get your books into bookshops, bookstores, another one about the whole concept really of being an indie author, what it means and how to make the best of it that you possibly can. So I also get involved with other kind of ad hoc projects with the Alliance to campaign for indie authors, to help share best practice, to build moral support. Now, ALLI is an online organisation, and I love the fact that it's a truly global group, because I can be chatting to anybody such as you, Richard, where you are in the States. I can talk to people in Africa, Australia, all over, and we can all share as if we're in the same room, and that's fantastic. But I also like real life meetings too, so I run a couple of author groups in the 2 towns that I'm closest to, Bristol and Cheltenham. They are, although they're not officially ALLI groups, because as I say, we're online, almost all of the people who come to those groups are ALLI members. If they haven't joined ALLI when they join my writers groups, they'll have joined it by the time they finished, because it's such a good organisation to be part of, and pretty much when any indie authors hear about it, they realise it's a good thing to join.
Well, okay. Yeah, you certainly are prolific. I've looked over your profile, and you've done a lot. How do you write so much?
By working very hard. There's no real magic solution other than to throw hours at the work, and I'm able to do that because I love what I do so much. I mean, I've also been very fortunate in many ways in that my previous career, before I focused full-time on my writing, I had worked in all kinds of jobs that required me to write lots of different things, but not fiction. I worked in marketing, I worked in public relations, I worked as a journalist, I worked for a charity that promoted children's reading. So, and each time in the different jobs that I worked in, a large part of my responsibility was to write, latterly website copy, brochures. Before websites became very common, or indeed were even invented, I was writing newsletters and articles for magazines and press releases and all that sort of thing. So that was a terrific apprenticeship, albeit a very long one, because I've only been writing full-time for a few years. It was a terrific apprenticeship to being very good at writing fast, to order, to length, to a clear specification, and also it was a very good preparation for self-editing. And so I'm pretty ruthless at editing my own work. I go through my own drafts time and time again to polish the prose as much as I possibly can and to refine craft the plot and the characters and so forth. So all of that must have helped. You know, if I'd have been working as a nurse or a doctor or something instead, then I might have found it much harder to sort of really knuckle down and write as prolifically as I do now.
Interesting. And why did you choose the genres that you've chosen?
I've always loved cozy mystery. I have loved, since I was a teen really, I liked writing, I liked reading classic crime from the golden age, you know, Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, that kind of thing. And I loved those for their sense of place, for the characterization, for a certain playfulness and a sense of fun, and as much as for the actual crime. And the crime to me is more of a riddle rather than being an interest in crime as such. You know, it's being the intellectual puzzle is the thing that excites me. And so when I decided that I wanted to start writing novels, that was a genre that I would fall into quite naturally. The other one that I could possibly fall into is writing sort of rural life stories just about the characters, sort of. It's kind of like the cozy crime that I'm writing without the crime.
I understand.
Yeah, but and I have a second series planned. Oh, in fact, I've got 2 more series planned, and the second one, I was going to make more of a sort of romantic fiction with a particular rural setting, and then readers were saying to me, well, but there've got to be some murders in it, you know, there's got to be some crime. I'm not persuaded of that yet, but we'll see how it works out when I start writing it. But I like whatever I write, it's going to be fairly light-hearted, upbeat, fairly jolly, lots of jokes. I've got lots of author jokes in lots of bookish jokes, literary jokes, author jokes, because I spend so much of my day with writers, and whether online or in real life. I like humour. If I try to write anything apart from sort of instructive non-fiction without humour, then it becomes very dull. And I'm not me if I'm not sort of larking about a little bit. So I have lots of sort of throwaway lines and sort of gentle gags, and also quite a few sort of bookish jokes without being highbrow. You know, I'm not sort of intellectual or snobbish about the literary jokes. I just have a lot of jokes about books and literature. I should say also that my cozy mystery series is partly set in a bookshop.
Oh.
So there's lots of opportunities for joking about books and readers as well. So I have a lot of fun with that, and having fun creating those little worlds is part of the joy of it. And I think part of the motivation, if I wasn't having such fun sort of going and having little adventures in my little created world, if I wasn't having that fun, then I probably wouldn't write so much.
I understand. Well, you partially asked my next question, which is why do you write? But maybe you can elaborate on that a little more.
Yeah, I can't imagine a life without writing, in that I've always written from when I was a small child, and it's just the way that I have expressed myself, the way I've processed events, when I've had particular sort of life challenges. My response has been to write it down. That kind of thing would obviously be just for me primarily. I've kept a diary. I think the first diary I kept was when I was about 7. It didn't last very long, but at least I made a start. It's a great way of processing trauma, I think. I mean, I've been very blessed. I've had a very happy and fortunate life, not without the odd sort of tragedy along the way, but writing has always been my way of processing things. And I've also always been quite a chatterbox, and liked sort of telling people stories and jokes and sharing experiences with them. So to turn that all into stories and to process it all to create stories is something that comes very naturally to me. So when I'm writing now, and also when I was writing the short stories, a lot of the things in there are inspired by overheard phrases, by events, by circumstances that have been a part of my life years and years ago. I've got 3 collections of short stories, and for example, in one of them is about dating, love and marriage. It's called Marry in Haste, and one of the stories that springs to mind off the top of my head is was inspired by a colleague in an office that I worked in the 1980s, where a lovely, lovely colleague of mine, we're still friends, she was a vegan. And she said that we were all, young, free and single at that point, and she said that she could never marry somebody who wasn't a vegan. And that clearly narrows the field down,
Mm-hmm.
It reduces your choices somewhat. So I wrote a story about somebody who's looking for a vegan partner, but that is all triggered by something that happened a long, long time ago. And because I've done lots of different jobs and worked in lots of different environments, I've got no end of store of that kind of little prompt, really. Writing prompts they are, I suppose, taken from real life.
Interesting. And what's your favorite memory about writing? I have some memories about writing that customers that I've helped or books that I've written that are fond. What do you have a memory about?
Probably the fondest memory I've got is probably the feeling of where it all started, which was back when I was about 6 years old, and I was in first grade, I guess, and I'd spent some time writing stories about a witch, and the teacher made me go around the whole school telling the story to each class in turn, including the children who were older than me, which is quite daunting. And I guess that's where something clicked in my head, and I thought, this is what I'm doing. I'm writing stories. I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. It took me quite a long time after that to get around to actually declaring myself publicly to be a writer and writing and publishing books. But I now feel like that's where it started, and I'm now doing finally what that 6-year-old girl wanted to do when she grew up.
And how many books have you published?
Well, there's 4 novels in the series. I'm editing the 5th one now, which will be out in September. I've got 3 collections of short stories. I've written 2 guidebooks for Ally, well, one of which is co-written with Dan Holloway. I've written a book called Sell Your Books, which was commissioned by Silverwood Books. And that was kind of my transition, actually, from writing commercially for publication, for public relations and marketing companies into self-publishing, because self-publishing services company, Silverwood Books, who are an Ally partner member, they asked me to write a book that would help their authors market their books. And that's really when I started to become aware of just what this whole self-publishing business was about and how it worked, and what a great opportunity there is these days for authors to get their work in front of readers worldwide. I've also written a little book raising awareness for a pet charity of mine, the JDRF, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, JDRF global organisation, which is benefiting the research into type 1 diabetes, because both my daughter and my husband have type 1 diabetes. So that's all I can think of. I'm sure there's something else, but I can't remember what else. So quite a range of different things. Oh, I've published some sort of standalone short stories as ebooks, but I've also turned them into little teeny tiny paperbacks as well, sort of for like promotional purposes and like stocking fillers for Christmas and that sort of thing.
Well, you kind of went into my next subject, which is, why do people want to self-publish books? What's the advantage of that over traditional or other forms of publishing?
There's lots and lots of reasons, lots of attractions. First of all is the creative control. So you as a self-publisher, and self-publishing it's not the best terminology in the world, because it kind of implies you're going to do everything yourself and it'll turn out looking homemade and a bit amateurish. But But really what it means is that you are being the publishing company, you're your publishing director as well as the actual writer of the book that's being published. And so that gives you the creative control, the freedom, and also the responsibility. I mean, it's a mixed blessing in a way, because you are also then your financial director and your the production director, and all of the other things fall to you. But this means that you have tremendous freedom compared to if you have your book published by a big publishing company. The writer is a small part in an enormous machine. The writer is just the trigger who produces the raw material, and has very little say in how the book is presented to the outside world. So a trade published author would typically not have much of a say in the title or the cover design or the way it's presented, the way it's sold. Also one of the big advantages is that things move much faster, potentially, when you're self-publishing, because you're not part of this enormous machine where everything is done by committee, and you have to get the cover approved, for example, you have to wait for the design brief to be agreed, then the designers to do the job, and then for the marketing people to look at it, and then for it to go out to perhaps to a test group to see whether it's really going to sell. And all of those things slow down the process in a big publishing company. Whereas if I got a contract tomorrow to get a novel published by a big company, it would probably not be published until the end of next year. I'm now editing a book that is going to be out there at the end of September. Now, one of the reasons that it's going to be out quite that quickly is that I've got a really good team in place around me. So I've got a terrific designer, Rachel Lowe, of Lawston Design, who does my covers. I've got a terrific editor, Alison Jack, who I know is very dependable. I've got them booked in. Hopefully it will all run like clockwork, and it will be produced and it will be out there. I do my own formatting for the interiors, so I've got that under control. So the buck stops with me. So it is hard work and it is a big responsibility, but the joy of it is you call the shots, you manage the business, and it's totally under your control. If I decide after I finish going through my edit that I've changed my mind, it needs more editing, I can take it back and do that. If I decide that I want to not publish at all, that's down to me. If I decide to change the title, I can do that. But I don't have to, and nobody else is going to change it if I don't want them to. So all of those things are good. And the other thing, which we shouldn't be shy about speaking of, is the financial factor. Because if your book is published by a big publishing company, they clearly have a lot of expenses. They've got a lot of staff to pay. They will have shareholders to pay. They probably have big real estate to manage in prestigious locations in city centres. They have a lot of costs to cover, which means that the author, for an average book, trade published book, the author will only end up with about 5%, 10% tops of the cover price of a book, which is not very much. If you are self-publishing a book, for the ebooks, if you publish it between the most popular price ranges on Amazon, for example, you would get 70%, that's 70% of the cover price of the ebook. It's a little bit more complicated with paperbacks because there are a lot more variables, and clearly there are a lot more fixed costs to produce a paperback than an ebook, which is essentially just a digital file once your initial setup costs have been paid for design and formatting. So there is potential to make a lot more per book. Now, next big question there that you have to consider is, are you in a better position than a big publishing company to sell multiple copies of your book? I'd have to say that depends on the book, because if you've done it right, if you've written a great book, it's the best book you can possibly make it, it's presented correctly for the genre to fit into the whole sort of book ecology at home amongst other books in its genre, then you've got your chances are optimal. A lot of people think that when you go to a trade publishing house, you will get a lot of marketing support. You know, I've heard too many authors say, oh, well, I just want to write books. I don't want to do any marketing. So that's why I'm going for a trade contract. Sadly, that's a misconception, because unless you are a huge celebrity for other reasons, or you are already a hugely well-established author who they know is a safe bet to sell lots and lots of copies, a publishing house is not going to spend very much time or effort on marketing your book, and they're not going to give you a marketing team or even a marketing person for very long to market your book. Typically you might get a day or a day and a half of a PR person's time to get out a few initial press releases and a little bit of blurb and stuff, but you don't get a lot of marketing support. The other the disadvantage that you have is that you don't have, as an Indian author, you don't have the presence or the influence in bricks and mortar bookstores, you know, bookstores on your main street and your shopping mall and so forth, compared to the big publishing houses who are putting hundreds of books into all these different stores each week. But that's where this book comes in, how to get your self-published book into bookstores. There are other ways that indies can work with bookstores, and most self-published books sell online anyway. A lot of indie authors leave bookstores out of their marketing campaign altogether because they can do very nicely from online sales, and I have to say most of my sales are online, but it's still fun to get distribution into bookstores, and I've got a few local bookstores who I've got presence in, and that's very pleasing because we all love bookshops.
Yes, that's probably the reason why we get into writing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Because I mean, that six-year-old little girl who was me deciding to be a writer, you know, the internet hadn't been invented. We didn't know any other way of selling books than in shops, and so even for the most devout self-published author, I think having a book in a bookstore is still a bit of a dream, and a bit of an ideal and ambition.
And libraries as well.
Yeah, libraries too, of course. Yeah, yes, yes. That was the other thing I wanted to be. I used to say I wanted to be a library lady because I didn't even know the word librarian. I just wanted to work in a library.
Now, you mentioned ALLY. What is ALLY, and what's the significance to self-published authors?
Right. ALLY is a global, non-profit membership organisation, which was started by an Irish author called Orna Ross. She had been trade published. She'd got a terrific contract with Penguin, and had some of her novels published. She was selling very well, but decided that because of the lack of control, the control issues that I mentioned just now, she had submitted to certain editorial changes that she wasn't happy with. They had retitled her books. They were presenting them less as serious historical novels than as sort of women's fiction, you know, with images on the front of girls in frocks, when they were books about the Troubles in Ireland, you know, very political books in lots of ways, or the historical novels about the impact of the politics on families and individuals. So Penguin were kind of wrapping them up wrong, or to putting them into what they wanted to publish rather than what she wanted to write. And she decided that she wanted to take her rights back and republish them her way. She's also a poet, still writes lots of poetry, and decided to test the waters of this new self-publishing business that she'd heard about by self-publishing poetry, thinking that if you can self-publish poetry and do well, you can self-publish anything, because poetry is, you know, pretty niche and not the most popular format and not the most popular genre in the world. And so that worked. She then published her novels, and that was all going well. So she looked around for an organisation to join for self-published authors. She was a member of what in the UK is called the Society of Authors. It's a British organisation, and there'll be equivalents all over the world. but she couldn't find one. There wasn't. She wanted an equivalent for self-published authors, and there wasn't one. So, being the sort of determined person that she is, she thought, well, I'll found one then. So, she gathered around her experts in various aspects of writing, production, all the different aspects of self-publishing, marketing, promotion, writing craft, and set up this organisation 6 years ago, and invited people to join, making it very affordable. So the membership is I think it's $99 a year for a published author. So it's enough to resource all to cover the cost of providing all the resources that we now provide, so that there is the daily blog, there's a members forum, we have run a partner membership with partners offering services. Most of them offer a discount to ally members, so most members can recoup the cost of their annual membership, sometimes many times over, through the discounts and deals they get from partner members. We have an online conference, free online conference, twice a year. We have all kinds of resources, a long list on the Ally website if anyone wants to go and look at that. So she set that up, and it quickly took off, launched at the London Book Fair because she happened to be living in London at the time, but it's truly global. I think it's something like 75% membership now in North America, about 20% European, 20% maybe, about that, and about 10% sort of Australasian, and smatterings of people in Africa, the Far East, and growing all the time. The other territories are growing all the time. So it's very exciting bringing them all together, and just that camaraderie, the feeling of not being alone, not being the only writer isolated in your garret typing away is a great reason to join. There's lots of networking opportunities there, lots of mutual benefits to find.
Yeah, I enjoy the online forum on Facebook. There's lots of spirited conversation. What I especially like is you don't allow people to promote, and so it doesn't get spammy.
Exactly, yes.
And that's the failing of most organizations that I find that don't enforce that rule, is the forums just deteriorate into this buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, and that's not why I'm there.
Yeah.
I like occasionally helping the authors. They usually have the same kind of questions, and I just answer, and it turns into a nice discussion. And then if we get in anything detailed, we go offline and do it on the messaging rather than on the forum.
Yeah, it's great, and I know you've helped many people there and engaged in the discussions, and it's great fun. It's very stimulating, makes you think more about your own writing as well, I think, and I think it also makes you aware of just how much you learn by doing. And I've really enjoyed, because I've been involved for almost all of the 6 years now that Ally has been going, and it's been so pleasurable to see authors join as complete novices with associate membership because they haven't published any books, so they get a reduced price membership, and then seeing them go on to publish their first book and their second and their third and their fourth, and to see careers really blossom on there, all fueled by the mutual support that they get from each other on the forum. And I think it's great too, because there are people there from all different countries, but also writing all different kinds of genre, and you don't have to be writing the same genre to help each other. And I find the same in little at my writers groups. I have maybe 12 or 15 people at a meeting, and we might all be writing completely different things, but we would all find ways of, in the conversation, it just comes out that you can all learn from each other's experience. And that's very enjoyable. It's very stimulating. Stops it ever getting boring, I think.
Yeah, that's the part of Ally that I use a lot, is the forum. I usually kind of lurk on it, and then once or twice a week jump into some things and help people out. And the thing that I've noticed is, I call it the elephant in the room about self-publishing, is promoting. You've talked about it a lot. That's where writers, they can write their book, and of course there's problems with that sometimes, and they can go through all the steps, and then they hit the marketing part, and it's like hitting a wall. And that's where I'm trying to help authors too. So what do you have to say about promoting your book?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people, they're passionate about writing their book, and they are so thrilled to get it out there, and then they just sort of seize up because for a lot of them, it's marketing anything is an unknown quantity, because if they've spent all their lives, or their previous careers have been as a plumber or as a veterinary surgeon or something, why should they know about marketing? And it's noticeable that a lot of the people who have been very successful with self-publishing very early on have come from a business background, have been used to marketing all kinds of things, and so for them it's natural just to roll into that step. But for most people, it's not easy, and they have to really brace themselves to even think about marketing, never mind learn the skills. And I think also it's difficult because it's so potentially overwhelming, because there's so much that you could be doing, and a lot of people try to do things that they don't like doing, or that they're no good at, or they have no real understanding of, or they try to do everything and end up failing at everything, or spreading themselves too thinly and seeing no real result. Yeah, a very common question for authors who are nervous of marketing is, can I pay somebody else to do the marketing for me? Because that's the easiest, they think that's the easy way out, just throw money at the problem and it'll be sorted. But I always say to that, well, you can, but you'll be wasting your money, because although there are some very good companies who will take on marketing contracts, and we have some who are partner members of Ally, for a new author who has no prior form, no real sort of awareness of themselves or their books, the best thing that they can do is actually to learn about the marketing environment themselves, to learn some basic skills, to set up some sort of core materials, a sort of basic marketing collateral. They need to have a good website. It doesn't need to be a fancy one or an expensive one. It can be a free WordPress one, but it needs to be the Bible of them, really, all the essential information about them, which readers will expect to be able to find by Googling online. And then all of their links everywhere else on where their books are placed should feed back to the website, or be directed back to the website. Ideally have an email collection system as well, so you can get people's email addresses, so you can market to them. When you've got a new book out, you can tell them and engage them and involve them. Social media, a lot of people think, oh God, I ought to be doing Instagram, I ought to be doing Twitter, I ought to be doing this, that and the other. I always counsel them that if they enjoy a particular social media, and you and I both enjoy Facebook very much, then embrace that one. Don't try and do something that's alien to you. Pick one or two and stick with them, and then if you feel that you've mastered those and have time to spare, go and use some other ones. I always say it's good to network, to get your name out there one way or another, and to start out small and local as well, because you can build up your experience and your credentials by doing just a local event in your local town hall or in your local school summer fair or something. You have a stand, get chatting to people, get known. And I think that kind of thing also has the advantage of actually making you start to think of yourself as an author, because a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they're quite apologetic about that. They're either apologetic and almost don't want to talk about them, or they go to the opposite extreme and are in your face, posting everywhere, buy my book, I've written a book, why aren't you buying my book? Going into the local bookstores and saying, I'm a local author, why haven't you got it on the shelves? And so they go from having a sense of no entitlement to a sense of far too much entitlement. And there's a balance to be had in between there. You have to earn your entitlement. You need to prove your worth. We have lots of information about different aspects of marketing on the Ally blog, and we must have probably about 300 or 400 posts on different aspects of marketing. For people who know nothing about marketing, a great starting point is to just follow the Ally blog and pick up every blog post that comes up about marketing. It's being part of Ally is the fast track to expertise in all different aspects of self-publishing, including the marketing. And also you'll see case studies of other authors' success stories that you can then sort of assimilate and make and use for your own books too.
Very good. Now you've given some promotional tips. What kind of tips would you give that aren't necessarily related to promotion for an author to succeed as a writer?
Well, one has become a bit of a cliche really in indie author circles, is to say consider it a long game, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But that truly is a good analogy, because first of all, it takes time and effort and persistence to just complete the first draft of a book. So many people will tell you, oh, I've got a book in me, oh, if only I had time I'd write a book. Well, only a small subset of those people actually complete the book. So first step, write the damn book. It's no good talking about it and dithering about it and talking about other aspects of it if you haven't written the thing. So write regularly. Don't be over ambitious. There are lots of schools of thought about whether how many words you should write a day, when you should write, how you should write, whether on screen or with pen and ink, paper and pencil. Find the combination that works for you, where you can regularly produce a certain amount of copy. I don't write every single day because I have a very busy life, but doing all the other associated things I do. But when I am in writing mode, what I do is write a chapter a day, and my books have about 36 chapters in, so I plan it all out and write a chapter a day, and then I know I'm motoring if I'm writing a chapter a day. There's a huge amount of editing goes in later, so I spend much more time editing than I do writing. But yeah, persistence, consistency, and to help you complete that book, the next piece of advice would be to remember that you write and edit with two different parts of your brain. The writing is the creative part, writing the first draft. The editing is the critical part. You can't engage the two at the same time successfully. Don't try and edit as you write. Just have your story in mind and write the first draft without stopping to look back. Just keep writing. If you get to a bit and you think, oh God, I haven't phrased that very well, doesn't matter. You'll edit it when you've got the whole picture, when you've got the whole story. It'll be much easier to hone it and edit it later on. Just get the thing there. Once you've got the basic shape, then comes the polishing. It's like if you want to make something out of a piece of wood or something, get the basic shape first and then whittle it down and polish it and hone it and shine it to the final finished object. Don't try and polish it as you go. That is the most productive route, and also it'll stop you just getting stuck at points. I'm a great believer in trusting the unconscious to keep it going for you. But by the same token, I don't believe in the muse or inspiration or writer's block or any of that stuff. You just have to sit down and apply yourself and write. So just do it, really. It's the main piece of advice, because once you've got the book, then you can start doing all the other stuff. It's great if you can set up, if you know that you're planning to write a book and you want to publish a book next year. Great if you can start setting up your website and networking and talking to other authors and making friends with key people early on. Great, but none of that is going to be any good if you haven't got the book there. I would also say, don't even just write the one book, because it's going to be much easier to be more successful if you are able to write more books. I'm sure you know about the whole way of thinking, 20 books to 50k theory. Mm-hmm. that has got quite a following. There's a Facebook group for it where it's considered that if you have enough books out there and each is earning a small amount a day in sales, then you're on your way to a living wage from your writing, which is a lot of people's dream. That's absolutely fine. A lot of people misinterpret that as meaning write 20 books a year and then they churn out lots of books very, very fast without looking at quality. you want both quantity and quality. Now that is a hard thing to do,
Of
but
course.
every book you've put out there should be the best you can possibly make it. Engage professional services as your budget permits to help you polish it, because nobody can do everything themselves. Nobody can do all of the editing, proofreading, formatting, cover design to a high professional standard. So wherever, just as a big publishing company would, you should engage expert services to do the things that you can't, so that the end package is as wonderful as you would like it to be, as good as it possibly can be. So the first thing before you do any marketing at all really is to have the best product, because you can market till kingdom come, and if your product is basically unpalatable, you're not going to get any buyers.
Or no repeat buyers, certainly.
Yeah, and that's what we want really. We want people to love our books, we want them to love our voices, so whatever we write next, they will come back to read more. Series writing, actually, that's another thing to mention. I have to say that when I decided to start writing novels, I made a commercial decision that it would be in series, in sets, because if you're writing a series and book one goes down well, it's a lot easier to sell book two to the people who've enjoyed book one than to sell another book one of a completely new concept to a different audience, or even to the same audience. So I've now got a successful series, doing very well with this series, and I want to keep that plate spinning really while starting another series that will also then become a spinning plate of several books, of at least 3 books. And then a third series. So my long-term plan really over the next 5 years is to have 3 substantial series of books running, and then hopefully more and more till I'm too old to write anything to string a sentence together is my plan.
Making too much money to worry about it, right?
Yeah, have to spend all my time counting my money instead of writing. That'll be it.
Yes. So that was a fascinating interview. Do you have any closing comments?
Well, I would say to anybody who is thinking of writing, who hasn't started yet, or to anybody who is writing and hasn't yet looked at self-publishing, I would say embrace self-publishing. The whole technology that's made self-publishing possible, the internet, the sort of the global village of the self-publishing community, an incredibly helpful, supportive, generous community. It's all there for you, and I think there has never been a better time to be an author. There is plenty of room for lots more good authors, for lots more good books. Books are never going to go out of style, no matter what happens with technology, whether they're ebooks or print books or whatever. People will always love story. They've loved story for as long as time, and equally with non-fiction as well. You know, it's more than one kind of story. So just go for it. It's great fun. There's never been a better time, and I wish you, Richard, and all of your viewers enormous success and the fun that I'm having with my books too.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for appearing.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. It's been delightful to speak to you.
Thank you for watching the interview. That was fascinating. I enjoyed every minute. I hope you did too. Remember to comment with any comments you have down below, and subscribe to this channel for future interviews. Thank you very much.